What if the person sleeping right next to you every single night was living a completely different life, and you had absolutely no idea? What if the man who kissed you goodbye every morning, sat across from you at the dinner table, coached your son's little league team, held your hand at your mother's funeral? What if that exact same man had been hiding $3 million from you for 20 years straight? Not for a month. Not for a couple years. 20 years. 2 full decades of smiling at you across the breakfast table while sitting on a secret big enough to buy a mansion in cash. That is exactly what happened to Sandra Millbrook. And the part that will really mess with your head? She never once, not even for a single second, suspected a thing. This is one of the most jaw-dropping stories of financial deception, hidden identities, and buried betrayal that has ever come out of a quiet American suburb. And by the time we get to the end of this story, I promise you, you are going to be sitting there with your mouth wide open, wondering how in the world this was even possible. So stay with me. Because every single layer of this story gets wilder than the one before it. And the ending? The ending hits completely different. Let's get into it. If you had driven through Cedarwood, Ohio back in the mid-90s and someone had pointed out the Millbrook house to you, your first thought would have been, now that is a family that has it together. The lawn was always trimmed. There was a basketball hoop in the driveway. A couple of decent cars in the garage. Nothing flashy, nothing over the top. Just solid, steady, and real. The kind of house that said we work hard, we are comfortable, and we do not take that for granted. And that whole image, every single bit of it, was built on one man. Robert Millbrook. Robert was your classic self-made American story. He grew up in a working-class household in Cleveland. His dad drove a delivery truck. His mom worked part-time at a grocery store. Money was always tight, and Robert knew it from a very young age. He watched his parents stress over bills, skip vacations, and make sacrifices that they never complained about out loud but that Robert never, ever forgot. So Robert made himself a promise early on. He was going to be the one who figured it out. He was going to make sure his family never had to sit at the kitchen table counting change. He put himself through community college on scholarships and part-time jobs. Got a degree in accounting. Spent his entire 20s grinding through a series of small firms, learning everything he could, impressing every boss he had. And by the time Robert hit 30 years old, he had landed a controller position at a solid mid-sized manufacturing company in the region called Harcourt Industrial. He was sharp. He was disciplined. He was the kind of employee that made his bosses sleep better at night. And most importantly, and this part matters a lot, he was trusted completely. Sandra came into his life when they were both 24. She had been working as a dental hygienist at a practice in the city. Robert had been referred there by a mutual friend. She always told people she fell in love with him while she was cleaning his teeth. He had, she used to say, a very honest face. They got married in 1991. Their daughter Kelsey was born in 1993. Their son Marcus followed in 1996. Robert was climbing the ladder at Harcourt, Sandra was working part-time while raising the kids, and life in Cedarwood, Ohio felt exactly like what it looked like from the outside. Normal. Happy. Blessed. Nobody, not Sandra, not their kids, not their neighbors, not their pastor, had any reason to think otherwise. Not just a vague idea. An actual, detailed, long-term plan that he had been quietly executing for 2 full decades while his wife packed school lunches 10 feet away from him in their kitchen. Robert had always been terrified of financial collapse. Not in a normal, sensible way where you keep an emergency fund and max out your retirement account. We are talking about a deep, almost obsessive fear rooted in watching his parents struggle his entire childhood. He had convinced himself, somewhere in the back of his mind were the really dangerous thinking lives, that the only way to truly protect his family was to have a completely separate financial life that no one, not even Sandra, could ever touch, threaten, or accidentally expose. In his mind, this hidden money was a survival fund. A doomsday account. The kind of safety net that he believed only worked if absolutely nobody knew it was there. He had rationalized it so thoroughly, for so long, that he had stopped thinking of it as deception at all. He genuinely believed he was protecting his family. But there was another layer. And this is the part that Sandra said cracked her open completely. Around 2005, right in the middle of all of this, Robert had quietly purchased a small piece of land about 90 minutes outside of Cedarwood. 2 acres, a simple structure on it, paid for entirely in cash through the same shell company he had been using to funnel the stolen funds. He had been going there on occasional work trips and fishing weekends for over a decade. Sandra had never questioned those trips. Why would she? Robert was responsible. Robert was reliable. Robert was the most steady person she had ever known. That land, and what it represented, became the symbol of everything Sandra felt she had lost when the truth finally surfaced. Not the money. Not even the theft itself. But the 20 years of complete, total, and deliberate control over her reality. She had not been a wife. She had been a character in someone else's story. And I know what you might be thinking right now. You are probably wondering, okay, so how did it come out? What finally blew this whole thing wide open after 20 years? Because here is the thing. It did not come out the way you would expect. It was not a furious wife who went snooping through his phone. It was not a suspicious colleague who tipped off the authorities. It was not even a careless mistake by Robert. It was something far more random. Far more ordinary. And in a strange, brutal kind of way, almost poetic in how simple it was. Stay right here. Because we are just now getting to the part where everything falls apart at once. In the spring of 2018, Harcourt Industrial was acquired by a larger regional conglomerate. Standard business deal. Happened to companies all the time. New ownership came in, brought their own people, and immediately launched a thorough top-to-bottom audit of the company's finances before completing the transition. Robert had survived audits before. He was actually very good at it. He knew exactly what to move, what to obscure, what to bury before anyone came looking. He had done it a dozen times over the years whenever the company brought in outside accountants. He always came out clean. He always came out trusted. But this time was different. The acquiring company brought in a forensic accounting firm from out of state. People who had never met Robert. People who had no existing relationship with him, no trust built up over years, no warm feelings about the loyal guy who had worked there forever. They came in cold, they came in thorough, and they came in with software and methodology that Robert had never encountered before. Within 6 weeks, they had found the first ghost vendor. Within 3 months, they had pulled the entire thread. Robert was called into a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2018. He walked in thinking it was a routine transition meeting. He walked out knowing that his 20-year secret had been completely and utterly dismantled. He was placed on administrative leave that same afternoon, pending a full criminal investigation. He drove home. Pulled into the driveway of the house in Cedarwood. Sat in his Ford F-150 for 45 minutes without moving. And then he walked inside and told Sandra everything. Not some of it. Not an edited version designed to minimize the damage. Everything. Sandra later described that evening as feeling like the floor simply disappeared from underneath her feet. Like she had been standing on solid ground her entire adult life and discovered in one conversation that the ground had never actually been there at all. She did not scream. She did not throw anything. She just sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they had eaten 10,000 family dinners together, and stared at her husband like she was looking at a complete stranger. Because in every way that actually mattered, she was. The criminal case moved fast. Robert, facing serious federal wire fraud and embezzlement charges, cooperated almost immediately. His attorney negotiated a plea agreement. The total amount stolen from Harcourt Industrial over the course of nearly 20 years was calculated at just over $2.8 million, with interest and legal fees pushing the full liability well past the $3 million mark. Robert was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. He was ordered to make full restitution. The hidden accounts were seized. The land outside Cedarwood was seized. Everything he had spent 20 years quietly building in the shadows was gone in a matter of months, but the criminal case, as devastating as it was, turned out to be the simpler part of what happened next. Sandra filed for divorce within 60 days of Robert's confession. She had spent her entire marriage being the responsible one. The budget-conscious one. The one who stayed up worrying about whether they were saving enough for retirement while her husband sat across the bed from her nodding along and saying, "You are right, we should be more careful," all while he was secretly sitting on $3 million. The betrayal Sandra felt was not just personal. It was existential. It rewrote her entire memory of her own life. Every vacation they had not taken because money was tight. Every home renovation she had talked herself out of. Every financial worry she had carried alone in the middle of the night. All of it, every single bit of it, had been completely manufactured. Unnecessary. A lie she had been living inside of without ever being given a choice. Their daughter Kelsey, who was 25 at the time, cut off contact with her father almost immediately. Their son Marcus struggled longer, deeply torn between the dad he had always known and the reality that had just been revealed, but ultimately stepped back from the relationship as well, at least for a significant period of time. Robert went to prison. The house in Cedarwood was sold. Sandra moved to a smaller place closer to her sister in a different state. And the man who had spent 20 years presenting himself as the steady, reliable, trustworthy foundation of an entire family's life disappeared behind a federal correctional facility fence. I have to pause right here again because this next part of the story raises a question that I have been sitting with for a long time. Robert told himself for 20 years that he was doing all of this to protect his family. He genuinely believed that. So here is what I want to know: do you think a person can deceive someone they love so completely, for so long, and still actually love them? Or does that level of deception mean the love was never truly real to begin with? Drop your honest opinion in the comments. There is no right or wrong answer here. This is one of those questions that does not have a clean resolution, and that is exactly why it is worth talking about. I want to see what you all think. Here is the part of this story that I think matters the most. Because if we end things with Robert in prison and Sandra's life in ruins, we miss the most important chapter of all. Sandra Millbrook could have stayed broken. And for a while, a long while, she was. She described the first year after everything came out as the darkest period of her entire life. Worse even than the night Robert confessed, because the confession was at least sharp and immediate. The aftermath was a slow, grinding dismantling of everything she had thought was true about herself, her choices, and her own worth. She went to therapy. She leaned hard on her sister. She journaled. She cried in parking lots and grocery stores and on the phone at 2 a.m. She did the unglamorous, invisible, exhausting work of trying to rebuild a sense of self after someone you loved had quietly stolen 20 years of your reality right out from under you. And then something started to shift. Sandra began speaking. First in small circles, a women's group at her church, a local community center event. Then wider and wider. She started a blog about financial abuse and coercive control in marriage that resonated with far more women than she had ever expected. She started receiving emails from women across the country who had their own versions of the same story, maybe not $3 million, maybe not federal charges, but the same core wound. A partner who had used money as a tool of control and deception while wearing the mask of a loving spouse. She became, entirely by accident and entirely through pain, one of the most authentic and respected voices on the subject of financial betrayal in relationships. She remarried in 2022. A quiet man named David who, she joked in one interview, keeps absolutely no secrets, because he genuinely does not know how to be anything other than completely transparent. She said that after Robert, she had developed a finely tuned radar for people who were not exactly what they appeared to be. David, she said, was exactly what he appeared to be. And that was the most attractive quality she had ever encountered in another human being. Sandra's story did not end with the betrayal. In many ways, it started there. Because we cannot tell this story fairly without going back to him one more time. Robert served 4 of his 6-year sentence before being released on good behavior in late 2022. He was 58 years old. His accounting career was permanently finished. His marriage was gone. His relationships with both of his children were deeply fractured. His name was now attached to court records and news articles that would follow him in any internet search for the rest of his life. In a brief interview he gave to a regional newspaper shortly after his release, one that was widely shared online, Robert said something that stuck with a lot of people who read it. He said he had spent 20 years telling himself a story where he was the hero, the protector, the man who was quietly carrying a burden nobody else understood so that the people he loved would always be safe no matter what happened. He said the thing that truly broke him in prison, not the conviction, not the loss of the money, not even the divorce, was the moment he finally stopped telling himself that story and clearly saw what the actual story had been all along. The actual story was that he had treated the people he loved most like they could not be trusted with the truth of their own lives. He had decided, silently, without consulting them, that they needed to be managed rather than respected. That his fear was more important than their reality. That his need for control was worth more than their right to simply know what was true. He said he would spend the rest of his life trying to become a man worthy of a different kind of story. Whether he gets there, nobody knows yet. But that is the thing about the truth. Once it comes out, it does not just change the present. It rewrites everything that came before it. Every memory, every quiet evening on the couch, every dinner at that kitchen table gets filtered through an entirely different lens. Sandra knew that better than anyone alive. So what do we actually take away from a story like this? Because I do not think it is as simple as do not marry someone who steals money. That is obvious. That is surface level. The deeper thing this story is really about is something most of us brush up against in our own lives without it ever getting this extreme. It is about the stories we tell ourselves to justify the things we do. Robert Millbrook did not wake up one morning and decide to be a villain. He woke up afraid. He woke up with a wound from his childhood that had never healed and never been dealt with. And instead of sitting with that wound, working through it, letting the people who loved him actually see it, he built a wall around it. A financial wall. A secret wall. And then he spent 20 years reinforcing that wall, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, lie by lie, until it was so high he could not see over it himself. Fear, when it goes underground, becomes deception. Not just toward the people around you. Toward yourself. And the people who pay the heaviest price for that underground fear are almost never the person doing the hiding. They are always the people standing on the other side of the wall, feeling like something is slightly off but never quite being able to name it. Never suspecting, not even for a second, that the whole foundation underneath them is built on a secret. Sandra did not fail to see the signs. There were no signs. That is not a failure of her instincts. That is a testament to how thoroughly Robert had buried the truth, even from himself. The real lesson here is that trust in a relationship is not just emotional. It is financial. It is informational. It is the shared right of two people to exist inside the same reality together. The moment one person decides they get to manage the other person's reality for them, no matter how loving the justification sounds, the relationship stops being a partnership and becomes something else entirely. And no matter how long it holds, no matter how solid it looks from the outside, something built on that kind of foundation will eventually crack. $3 million. 20 years. One Tuesday afternoon in October when a forensic accountant from out of state pulled the wrong thread and the whole thing unraveled. And then, finally, brutally, completely, the truth came out. If this story hit you the way it hits most people when they hear it for the first time, if you found yourself feeling something you were not fully expecting, then I need you to know there are more stories just like this one waiting for you right here on this channel. Stories about the hidden lives people lead right in plain sight. The secrets that grow for years until they collapse under their own weight. And the real human beings, real people with real families, who have to figure out how to keep living once the truth finally comes out. These are not just stories that entertain you. These are the kind of stories that make you see things differently. About trust. About the people closest to you. About the things you might be carrying right now that you have never said out loud. And look, if you are not subscribed yet, I am going to be real with you. You are going to want to be. Because the stories we have lined up coming very soon are on a completely different level. Some of them are even more shocking than this one. Some of them are going to make this feel like a warm-up. So hit that subscribe button right now. Tap the notification bell so you do not miss a single upload. Because these stories come out fast and the comments on the first day are always the best conversation of the week. And before you close out, drop your thoughts below. Did this story shake you? Did it make you look at your own relationship differently? Did it make you want to go check your bank statements? Whatever you are feeling right now, the comments are the place for it. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.